Nice Micro Monday. Just because you put it on GitHub, it doesn't mean it's open source. So recently this program called Albert have been brought to my attention. It is kind of a launcher where you start typing in and it either brings up a program or you can make it to calculate something or open documents or, translation and search on the internet. So it's a very versatile application, but this is not why I want to talk about it. I want to talk about it and the way how this program is distributed, because we talk about free software and open source software a lot, and both are technical terms. So free software has a meaning, like it's a software that respects your computing freedoms, and your freedoms to these computing freedoms are like you can inspect the code, modify the code, redistribute the code with your modifications, things like that. And open source has a very similar definition to that. But when people just colloquially hear these terms, free software, people usually don't associate this with freedom, they associate it with costless. So you don't have to pay for it, even though the technical term for that software would be freeware and free software. So these are different. And the same with open source. Many people would think that, if I make my source code available, that's open source. Even though I don't allow people to modify it, I don't allow them to redistribute the modified versions. If you do that, that's called source available. And so especially for this program, it's confusing because in the contributing page, they say that whatever you contribute, it's going to be licensed under the GPL, but GPL is kind of a sticky license. So once you get something under GPL, you have to your modifications also have to be GPL. Well, of course, if it's like separate from the original code, then you can just license part of it under GPL, I guess. But the thing is that when you go on GitHub, you don't really have any help, because there is no file, no copying file, there is no license file, there is no licensing under the README file. So what do you do? What can you do with this program? Just because the source code is up on GitHub and you can clone it and maybe use it, it doesn't make it free software. It doesn't make it open source. And people got upset with this situation because, well, if you are working for a distribution, even in your free time or even for money, it doesn't matter, and you want to package a software in your official repositories so your users can get it, you will have to have the right to redistribute the program, and you also have to have the right to modify it, because you might have to modify it to fit in with your own operating system's ecosystem. So someone made this issue. The Albert website says Albert is GPL licensed, 100% free and open source. Well, the website have been changed. It's not saying that anymore. But there is no license file or license headers or any mention of license or GPL in the source code. Please specify the license by adding a file called copying or license in the repository root. Dubious licensing is likely to repel extension developers and distro packagers. So what does this mean? Let me just magnify it so you can read it. And this means that, well, you don't know how this is licensed, and in most of Western countries where the protection of intellectual property is ingrained in law, whenever you put out a creative work, be it a painting, a writing, source code, whatever, you are the sole owner of the copyright, which means that you have the sole right to control the copying and the distribution of this creative work. And when you license something out, that license can specify how other people can interact with this code. And if you don't specify it in the license, it's very dubious for a distro maintainer. What can they do? So they might have to get personally, like one by one, everyone who wants to put this software in their distribution will have to acquire a written consent letter, maybe, or any kind of written permission to bundle it with a Linux operating system. And so a lot of people were complaining, and the author of this program was also complaining about the people complaining. So his argument was, and you can just find this issue of the Albert GitHub number 765. You can read all these very, very long arguments over here. But basically, main argument from the author was that he's not a lawyer. He wants to spend his time coding and not thinking about licensing, but also doesn't want to make his program available for everyone else to make money on it. Because in free software, if you are allowed to redistribute other people's code for money. So someone licenses you a piece of software under GPL, you can make money on their work. You still have to abide by the GPL by providing the source code, but you can still, get paid for it. This is something that the author of this program doesn't want. But anyways, so the thing is that Eli Schwartz from the Arch Linux team complained also that somehow if you use GPL code in your proprietary licensed software, that's not good, and I don't know if that happened or not, but anyways, the thing is they decided to remove it from certain repositories. Josh Straubel from the Solus project has also deprecated it from its repository and removed from the other repository too, because they just don't want to deal with the licensing issues here. And then it has been dropped from the Gentoo mirrors, also from Void Linux, and so of course people got upset. The author of the program also got upset with this because they said that they let the freely available Linux distributions to package it, but the people who are managing the distribution, they just did not want to deal with this anymore. And if you just read all this through, in the end what you will find is the last comment by the time of this recording is that this thread makes me sad. And indeed, this thread also makes me sad, because if you want to make a software that respects your users, if you want to make people to be able to use what you've created, and you don't want to make money over your software by exploiting your users, so maybe you want to make money some other ways, I think the simplest way is just license under the GPL license. And even though you might not like some aspects of the GPL license, like some other people might be able to make money somehow on your work. But anyways, if you want your work to be featured in Linux distributions all over the world, and you are a small creator who cannot really expect from every distribution to just grant them a license, one by one, get to a deal with them for licensing it, then it's probably the easiest is just to put it under GPL license, especially because if people like your software and something happens to you, you don't want to work with it anymore, it's just going to make it much, much easier for other people to pick up the work and continue on it. But even, if you just want to really cling to it, then I guess you have all the right to do that. And for that, what we have to remember is that the GPL is a license. So by licensing your work under GPL, you are still the sole copyright owner. So your work is your intellectual property. You just let other people use it under certain conditions, but it's still yours. And if someone claims it's theirs, you can still sue them. If you would like to you can double license. So you can license it under the GPL to the general public, and you can sell other licenses to other people if you want to make money that way. Also, the whatever it's called, the branding is totally separate from copyright, and its branding is not affected by GPL. So someone cannot take your Albert and modify it and publish it as Albert. They either have to rename it or whatever, just specify that this is not Albert anymore, because the branding is not, you don't cede your right to the brand by licensing it under the GPL. So I guess this is my rant. If you really want to contribute to the open source and the free software community, just use a license that have been, so you don't have to be a lawyer, you don't have to understand everything because the lawyers already did that job, and you can just go to the Free Software Foundation's or the Open Source Initiative's website or just Wikipedia and just search what licenses are available, and you get like a very short summary of them, and just you can choose one, put it on your work, and just be part of the real open source and real free software community, instead of trying to reinvent the wheel by putting some very weird proprietary source available license on your code. So, Nice Micro Monday, just because you put it on GitHub, it doesn't make it open source. See you next time. Bye.